Hello, and welcome to Part 2 of NJDEP's training video series on Combined Sewer Overflow, or CSO, monitoring report forms. This part is entitled Completing a CSO DMR. During this video, we will explore the details of a CSO DMR and its associated submittal form. In addition, parameter by parameter, we will complete the form using a series of hypothetical examples. For training purposes, we will be using the paper version of the DMR form that you would receive through the mail if you were not registered for electronic reporting. However, the same principles apply to the electronic DMR form since, as explained in Part 1 of this series, they are a close replica of each other. Let's first discuss the submittal form that accompanies a DMR. Here we have a blank copy of a generic DMR submittal form. Each CSO outfall will have its own DMR, and each DMR has its own DMR submittal form. Please note that any DMR submitted without its associated DMR submittal form, properly completed and signed, will not be accepted or processed by the department. On the top left, you will find the NJDEP's permit number. Permittees should ensure that the number identified in this box matches the number identified in their NJDEP's permit. At the top of the form, you will also find the monitoring period for which data is being reported. Permittees should ensure that the monitoring period dates specified on the DMR submittal form correspond to the monitoring period for which their data is being reported. Please note that the monitoring period dates must not be altered on the form. If you have a situation in which you believe modifying these dates may be appropriate, please contact the department for further instruction. On the top right, you will find the monitoring location, in this case the permitted CSO outfall, for which data is being reported. Permittees should ensure that the outfall identified in this box corresponds to the outfall for which the data is being reported. Next, you will find the names and addresses of the permittee, the location of the permitted activity, and the DMR recipient. Permittees should verify that the names and addresses appearing on the DMR submittal form are correct. In the middle of the form, you will find a No Discharge This Monitoring Period checkbox. In general, if there wasn't a discharge from the CSO outfall during the monitoring period, the permittee should check this box. If checked, only the DMR submittal form is required to be submitted by the permittee for the monitoring period associated with the outfall. In other words, the permittee will not need to submit the actual DMR form. However, for CSO permittees, there is an exception associated with this checkbox. For the CSO outfall with the lowest numerical monitoring location designator, also termed the first outfall on the permit, a DMR will always be required to be submitted to the department due to the presence of the solids, floatables, and precipitation parameters. As such, this box should never be checked for that outfall. Also in the middle of the form, you will find a checkbox associated with submitting comments on the monitoring report. Permittees should check this box if they wish to submit comments on information provided in the DMR. These comments will assist the department in reviewing the information provided or not provided on the form. Comments should be attached to or submitted with the DMR submittal form and must identify the NJDEP's permit number, the monitoring location, and the monitoring period associated with the comments. Towards the bottom of the form, the information and signature of the highest ranking licensed operator having day-to-day managerial and operational responsibilities for the combined sewer system, including the responsibility to authorize capital expenditures or hire personnel, must be provided. Where a local agency has contracted with another entity to operate the treatment works, the highest ranking official of the contracted entity and not of the local agency shall certify the DMR submittal form. The official required to certify the DMR form may authorize another responsible official, consistent with the provisions of NJAC 7:14A 4.9b to certify the DMR on their behalf. In other words, the official required to certify the DMR can submit a one-time written correspondence to the department providing authorization that another named person may certify the DMRs on their behalf. If the official initially certifying the DMR on the line above does not have the responsibility to authorize capital expenditures or hire personnel for the local agency, then certification from the official having those responsibilities is required at the bottom of the DMR submittal form. Their signature on the DMR submittal form indicates that they have received and reviewed the accompanying DMR. Just as was the case with the first certification on the DMR submittal form, the official required to certify the DMR at this location on the form may also authorize another responsible official, consistent with the provisions of NJAC 7:14A 4.9b, to certify the DMR on their behalf. Now, let's turn our attention to the DMR form itself. For the CSO with the lowest monitoring location designator, here is an example of what your form will look like for the January 2016 monitoring period. Highlighted are the open fields that CSO permittees will be required to complete. Please note that they are only located in the 7th, 11th, and 12th columns on the form. The first parameter that appears on the form is solids floatables. Please note that this parameter will only be present on the DMR for your CSO outfall with the lowest numerical monitoring location designator. Generally, this would be the CSO outfall identified as 001A. However, if the lowest numerical designator for a CSO outfall regulated in the permit is not 001A, solid floatables will be associated with an alternate outfall. Under the quality or concentration header, the permittee is to report the total volume of all solids floatables removed and disposed of from all outfalls during the monitoring period. As indicated on the DMR, this value is to be reported in cubic yards. Please note that reporting on this parameter is only necessary when the solids floatables material has been measured for disposal. Further, for months where disposal of solid floatables materials has not occurred for any CSO outfall regulated through the permit, the permittee shall report a value of code equals N on the DMR in this field. The open field under the number of excursions header should always be left blank, since there are no limitations associated with this parameter. For simplicity, the department has concluded that the open field under the frequency of analysis header should always be reported as once per month, and the open field under the sample type should always be reported as measured. Now, let's run through an example and begin completing a DMR form. In this example, a permittee is regulated for 5 CSO outfalls. During the course of the month, approximately 1 full dumpster of solids floatables material was disposed of. The volume of the dumpster is 30 cubic yards. What value should be reported on the DMR? Since 1 completely filled dumpster of solids floatables material was disposed of, and the volume of the dumpster was 30 cubic yards, the total amount of solids floatables material disposed of during the month for all outfalls was 30. As such, a value of 30 should be entered in the open field under the quality or concentration header. In addition, as directed by the department, values of once per month and measured should be entered under the frequency of analysis and sample type headers respectively. The next parameter that appears on the form is precipitation. Just as was the case with solids and floatables, this parameter will only be present on the DMR for your CSO outfall with the lowest numerical monitor location designator. Under the quality or concentration header, the permittee must report the total amount of precipitation measured during the monitoring period from a single rain gauge representative of the area. For the purposes of DMR reporting, a rain gauge located within the permittee's combined sewer system would be considered representative of the area. Examples of acceptable places within the combined sewer system where a rain gauge might be located are at nearby weather stations, such as ones found at an airport, or at the local or regional sewage treatment plant. A rain gauge located outside of the permittee's combined sewer system may be considered representative of the area upon department approval. There may be situations where the site-specific characteristics of the area necessitate the use of multiple rain gauges to obtain precipitation data representative of the area, for example in the case of larger combined sewer systems. In those situations, the permittee must contact the department for further direction. There may also be cases where trace values of precipitation are measured at a rain gauge for a particular day. In those cases, trace values do not need to be included in determining the total precipitation during the month. Lastly, for months where no precipitation was measured during the monitoring period, the permittee shall report a value of 0 on the DMR. For precipitation, just as was the case with solids floatables, the open field under the number of excursions header should always be left blank, since there are no limitations associated with this parameter. The open field under the frequency of analysis header should always be reported as once per month, and the open field under the sample type should always be reported as measured. In proceeding to complete a DMR form, let's run through an example for precipitation using the same hypothetical permittee identified during the solids floatables exercise. For this permittee, all 5 CSO outfalls are associated with a relatively small combined sewer system, and, as such, a single rain gauge located at a nearby airport within the combined sewer system is being utilized to obtain precipitation data representative of the area. During the course of the month, the following precipitation levels were observed at a rain gauge: 0.25 inches on January 3rd, 0.5 inches on January 4th, 1.25 inches on January 8th, 0.3 inches on January 9th, and 0.2 inches on January 26th. What values should be reported on the DMR? Since the total precipitation recorded at the rain gauge for the month was 2.5 inches, a value of 2.5 should be entered in the open field under the quality or concentration header. In addition, as directed by the department, values of once per month and measured should be entered under the frequency of analysis and sample type headers respectively. The next parameter that will appear on the DMR form is duration of discharge. For most permittees, this parameter will not appear on any of their DMRs until the January 2016 monitoring period. This is due to the 6-month delay on reporting for this parameter that was provided in their final permits. In addition, because of the delay in reporting, prior to January 2016 monitoring period, these permittees will not be receiving or be required to submit DMRs for those CSO outfalls where duration of discharge would be the only parameter to be reported on the form. In other words, all outfalls but the first outfall. For those permittees where the final permit does not allow for a 6-month delay in reporting on this parameter, duration of discharge will appear on the DMR starting July 1st, 2015. Under the quality or concentration header, the permittee must report the total number of whole calendar days where a discharge from the CSO outfall occurred. For clarification, this value represents the estimated number of days during the monitoring period where at least one discharge from the CSO outfall occurred, not the number of discharge events that occurred during the monitoring period. If there were multiple intermittent discharges from a CSO outfall over the course of a single day, the value that would be used to report on the DMR would be 1 day. If a discharge from an outfall did not occur during a monitoring period, and submission of the DMR for that monitoring period is necessary, as is the case with the first CSO outfall, the permittee shall report 0 in this field. Reported duration of discharge values on the DMR can be determined using several methods. For example, simple visual observations by representatives of the permittee during and after periods of precipitation may be adequate. Methods of visual observation include the direct witnessing of a discharge or observed evidence of a discharge through the use of chalk lines or tethered wooden blocks. The use of monitoring instruments, such as floats and sensors, may also be used to determine reported values. For some permittees, it may also be necessary to utilize outputs from computer modeling to derive reported DMR values. In these cases, the use of a correlation between CSO discharge occurrences and rainfall amounts would be appropriate. Just as was the case with the other parameters, the open field under the number of excursions header should always be left blank, and the open field under the frequency of analysis header should always be reported as once per month. However, in the case of duration of discharge, the open field under sample type should always be reported as estimated. Now let's run through an example for this parameter, again using the same hypothetical permittee used for the other parameter exercises. For CSO outfall 001A, the permittee is using a tethered wooden block placed at the outfall to determine the reported value. Based on visual inspections of the wooden block, it was observed that at least one overflow from the CSO outfall occurred on the 3rd, 4th, 8th, 9th, and 26th day of January 2016. What value should be reported on the DMR? Since at least one overflow occurred on 5 days during the month of January, a value of 5 should be entered in the open field under the quality or concentration header. In addition, as directed by the department, values of once per month and estimated should be entered under the frequency of analysis and sample type headers respectively. The last parameter that appears on the DMR form is lab certification number. Because laboratory analysis is not needed for any of the parameters contained on the DMR form, all open fields associated with this parameter should be left blank. Our DMR form is now complete and ready for submission. Let's recap completion of a DMR form. As we have seen, reported values under the quality or concentration column are based on the type of parameter and its required units. All open fields under the number of excursions column should always be left blank when reporting on all 3 parameters. In addition, the frequency of analysis for all 3 parameters should always be reported as once per month. The sample type for solid floatables and precipitation should always be reported as measured, while the sample type for duration of discharge should always be reported as estimated. Lastly, all open fields for the lab certification number parameter should always be left blank when completing the DMR. NJDP's CSO permittees are encouraged to refer to NJDP's CSO website for additional resources specific to the completion of CSO outfall DMRs. On the website, you will find the answers to frequently asked questions, as well as a quick guide for the completion and submission of CSO DMRs. If you have any additional questions specific to the completion of a CSO DMR, please contact your NJDP CSO team leader. Their name and contact information is available through the CSO website. In addition, for general questions regarding DMRs, please contact Debbie Espasti at 609-984-4428 or at debbieespasti@dep.nj.gov. This concludes Part 2 of NJDP's training video series on Combined Sewer Overflow Monitoring Report forms. Please remember that DMRs must be submitted monthly and are due 25 days after the last day of the monitoring period. Based on the effective date of the final permits, the first DMR is due on or before August 25th, 2015. And lastly, there are 2 methods of DMR submission, paper or electronic, and the department strongly encourages electronic submission of the DMRs. Thank you for your time.